Hey, this is Cat with Charts for sharkcharts.live, and today I'll be talking about the Meow mix indicator, which is sort of our custom does everything Bollinger bands overlay. Meow mix comes in a light version that is limited to SMA and regular standard deviation, which uses the default PineScript function so it can load fast, and a full version that includes support for about a dozen different moving average types and other types of standard deviation calculations. They have built-in default Bollinger band lengths relevant to the volatility strategy. If you've seen our charts, you'll notice that we favor very long Bollinger band lengths in contrast to how they're typically used as a default indicator, because we're more interested in how different distributions expand and contract relative to each other. So getting into the different settings, you'll notice the color scheme I have here is different than the one Dad Sharks uses. So Dad Shark has his own color scheme, and for the indicators on his charts, they're all styled in his templates to what you'll see on stream. Whereas the default color scheme in my templates and the indicator itself are generally designed so that you could put a lot of information on one chart and the colors will actually contrast against each other and you can tell it apart. So it has several different presets built in depending on what exactly you might want to do. For the main long-term overview, the 50 and 200 length bands with 1.25 standard deviation, 14 and 50 with 2.2 and 3.2 are more for quickly identifying a trend in a local time frame. And if we go to custom, we can plot up to 4 different bands. So, yeah, you'll notice that the color schemes are relatively contrasting. I'd say up to 3 bands is very clear. 4 bands was a challenge. But this is broadly what I came upon. I didn't add a 5th band because I couldn't find a way to make color schemes that looked like anything other than noise. We also include the ability to plot up to 3 additional moving averages on top of this chart. So what this indicator could do, especially if you're on a free version of TradingView without a paid subscription, is that you can essentially put all the moving averages and Bollinger bands you could possibly want on one chart with just one indicator. So moving into the full version, let's talk about what it can do the light version can't. So you'll notice there are a lot more settings. The first and foremost is that you can change the average type and the type of standard deviation. SMA and unweighted will replicate what you're used to just with regular standard deviation and regular still moving average Bollinger bands. So if we switch it to volume weighted, you'll notice that you get spikier, more jagged movements. And then we also include the zero lag EMA of volume as a sort of a correction for the fact that because you often see moves that happen on high volume like this, for 200 period band, it's volume weighted, you'll see the contraction happen exactly 201 periods away because the volume faded off. But it really is just that one spike at the beginning aging out of the look back. Whereas putting some type of exponential decay on it will make it more responsive to what's actually happening in volume now. So we start looking at the different built-in average types. There are more of these here than we necessarily tend to use in the videos and the Discord, and I'll admit that there's a certain amount of blue sky where we've got the functionality beyond what we actually have already investigated using. I would point people specifically to VWMA as another one that's often worth checking, and often with slightly different period lengths than the default, though as you can see in Bitcoin here, you're getting some pretty good following on the daily chart with VWA that wasn't necessarily apparent with SMA. With VWA in particular, you would want to use the volume-weighted standard deviation because that would be technically correct. Because this is an all-in-one moving average and Bollinger Band plotting indicator, it makes sense that you can add different types of moving averages within the same indicator, and this is pretty convenient compared to having to individually go and load up all these different indicators. This does also include the ability to change the standard deviation lengths, which we don't normally use very often, but there is some relevance there if you're familiar with WVAV in Whistler's books. This would allow you to try and replicate that as best you could in PineScript. The problem is there isn't tick-level data available in TradingView right now, so the best you can do is to use multiple standard deviation lengths. But I've found that to be very specific to a given chart and time frame, and haven't, as of yet, released more automatic features for that. So the one last thing I want to mention are these moving versus non-moving standard deviations. So normally for Bollinger Bands, you plot a standard deviation as calculated least squares from the current bar to the whole look back used to calculate the current average. Moving replicates a functionality that I've seen used in other strategies, particularly volume-based strategies, where instead you're looking at a moving calculation of standard deviation, where it's looking at each bar in the look-back period and calculating a standard deviation at that point relative to its current average. And this will tend to create much wider bars, and is kind of asking a different question about, or rather, instead of looking at current volatility specifically, it's more answering the question about how far away something is or isn't trading from the average, and how fast that is changing. So with that, I'll say that more so than a lot of indicators, this is one where you could pretty easily add defaults or additional moving average types by request. So feel free to ask questions or make suggestions in Discord, and happy to answer any feedback.